He worked for a small delivery company in a town where everyone knew everyone else's business. Dale Light's Delivery wasn't one of those big services like Uats or Dord. It was a local business, a private startup run by a local couple, earning just enough to get by. The name sounded friendly, but there was something about delivering food at night that always sent a shiver down my spine. The streets, full of life during the day, became gloomy and deserted at night, lit only by the faint streetlights. My job was simple: pick up food and deliver it. He quickly got used to the rhythm driving through quiet neighborhoods and watching the lights in the houses flicker on and off as people settled in for the evening. Most customers were friendly, waving from their doorsteps or even saying thank you from behind a mask. After a while, you start to recognize the people. That's just how it is in small towns. He learned their habits. The ones who ordered pizza late at night, the families who always wanted extra fries, or the man who gave you extra if you didn't utter a word. But of course, there were the strange people who sent shivers down your spine. He avoided certain neighborhoods, especially after dark. And then there was Elaine. Elaine lived in an old part of town, right near the high school, where the houses had definitely seen better days. The front yards were overgrown, long neglected by their owners. She always ordered fish and chips, always, and every time she had the same instruction: knock and wait for her to come to the door. Pretty normal, actually, but Elaine lingered. She liked standing there, smiling with that strange grin that didn't quite reach her eyes, and always invited me inside. He always declined, muttering some excuse about other deliveries he had to make, but there was something about the way she looked at me, like a wolf watching a lamb. One night, when business was pretty slow, he got the notification: new order, fish and chips for Elaine. He almost skipped it. The clock showed 2:15 am, and he only had 1 hour left in my shift, but it was a big order, bigger than usual. He was desperate to make up for the meager tips of the night, so I accepted the job despite my uneasy feeling. He drove to the restaurant, my stomach already feeling uncomfortable. The street outside was dark, and the flickering neon sign cast airy, jagged shadows on the parking lot. Even the restaurant seemed quieter than usual, almost as if the entire town was asleep except for me and Elaine. He grabbed the heavy brown bag, from which grease was already soaking through the paper, and headed toward her house. Elaine's house stood out from the neighborhood like a sore thumb sagging 2-story building with peeling paint and half-torn blinds on the windows, probably scratched by cats. The porch was cluttered with garbage bags, and a rotting deck chair leaned against the front door. The place was just disgusting from top to bottom, a reflection of the woman who lived there. He took a deep breath, shaking off the crawling feeling that ran up my spine, and reached for the order. He walked up the porch and immediately noticed a sour stench in the air, almost like rotting meat mixed with something else sweat, maybe. He couldn't quite place it. It was the kind of smell that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. He knocked once, and the door opened on its own, a chilling creak accompanying the slow swing. That was the last thing he wanted. It wasn't the first time her door was unlocked, but on this evening it swung open as if it had been waiting for me. The darkness inside was absolute. The faint street lights barely penetrated the threshold before being swallowed by the shadows. And then the smell hit me full force, thick, stronger, almost rancid. "Elaine?" he called out hesitantly, my voice sounding far too loud in the silence. No answer. He cautiously took a step inside. The floor creaking under my weight broke the ominous quiet. "Elaine, your food is here. He should have left." He know that now, but at the moment, he thought maybe she had fallen or was too sick to come to the door, and despite everything, he didn't want to just leave the food outside, Slowly, my eyes adjusted to the dim light coming from deep within the house, the flickering of a lamp, or perhaps a TV. The living room, however, was worse than ever. Clothes and papers were scattered everywhere. Half-empty food containers and empty bottles lined the floor. The carpet felt damp, and he didn't want to know why. He placed the bag on the counter, clearing a small spot among the chaos. Then he noticed movement at the edge of my vision shadows gliding along the walls, as if something were lurking in the dark. "Elaine?" he called out again, more urgently this time. From somewhere deep down the hall, he heard a faint voice, barely more than a whisper. "In here, help me." It was her voice, but it didn't sound right, too weak, too distant, as if coming from a well. My gaze darted back to the front door, which now seemed much further away than I remembered. My heart began to pound faster, and everything in me screamed to leave. But what if she really needed help? He walked down the narrow hallway. The walls seemed to close in on me. The smell became unbearable, like an open, rotting wound. Finally, he reached the bedroom door, which was slightly ajar. A faint light flickered from behind it. Cautiously, I pushed it open. There she lay, on the bed, her massive form wrapped in tangled sheets that barely covered anything. Her skin was pale, glistening with sweat. She smiled weakly, but it wasn't a smile of gratitude, it was something else. "Come in," she said, her voice thick and drawn out. "I need you." I froze, my stomach churning. Something was fundamentally wrong with the way she lay there, the way she was looking at me. Slowly, he backed away, my heel catching on the edge of the rug. "He brought your food," he stammered, already starting to back out of the room. He should go." Suddenly, a deep, gruff voice cut through the silence from somewhere behind me. "No, stay here. She needs you." I spun around abruptly and saw him. At the end of the hall stood a man, dirty and sinister. His face was unkempt, his clothes ragged. It was the homeless man I had often seen wandering aimlessly around town, but something about him was different, sinister. His eyes glowed with madness. "She needs you," he repeated, slowly approaching me, a dirty hand outstretched. "You can help her." He backed away, my pulse hammering in my ears. He don't think so," he began, but he cut me off, his voice growing louder, more urgent. "She's sick. Can't you see that? You have to give her what she needs." And then he winked at me, a cold shiver running down my spine as he drew closer, his steps slow but deliberate, his breath heavy and wheezing. He risked a glance back into the bedroom. Elaine was still lying there, with that ominous, sweaty grin, her hand raising again to beckon me to her, an inviting gesture that only made me more afraid. The air around me seemed to thicken, the walls closing in. This wasn't normal. This wasn't strange behavior or a quirky situation. This was something much darker, much more dangerous. My back finally hit the wall, and I felt the reality of the situation fully sink in. He was trapped. The man stepped closer, his dirty clothes emitting a foul stench, a mix of sweat and decay. His voice turned into a murmuring mantra, almost like a prayer. "You have to help her. You're here to help her, or give it to her. You're the delivery boy, right?" My throat was dry as I forced the words out. I'm just the delivery guy. E brought her food, and E have to go now." "Deliveries can wait," he snapped back, his voice like a sharp knife cutting through the oppressive silence. He was only inches away from me now. He could see the blemishes on his skin, the yellow glimmers in his glassy eyes, darting back and forth, scanning me like a predator its prey. "Elaine is hungry," he added, his voice almost a hiss. "She's been waiting for you. Give her what she needs." Behind me, Helene's voice rang out, sickly sweet with a sing-song tone that made my hair stand on end. Please don't go. Stay a little while. You'll like it. We'll take care of you. I turned back to Hare only to see her sitting up, her massive body barely covered by the thin sheet. The faint light made the sweat on her face gleam, and for the first time, I could see the full extent of the squalor of her life. The bed was stained, dark discoloration spreading across the mattress. The stench of mold and putrefaction seemed to emanate from every corner of the room. The man used my moment of shock to grab my shoulder. His grip was clammy, his fingernails dirty, and I felt them dig into my skin. You can't leave, he growled, pulling me back toward the bedroom. Elaine wants you to stay. No! He finally screamed, tearing my arm away with all my might. The sudden movement made me stumble, my back crashing against the doorframe. He am not whatever this is. Do it yourselves. The man's face twisted into an ugly grimace, his lips drawing back to expose yellow, cracked teeth. You can't leave, he hissed. Not until she gets what she wants. He didn't want to know what that meant. He did the only thing I had left to do. He turned and ran. He ran down the hall, my feet pounding on the worn carpet as he raced toward the front door. Behind me, he could hear the man's heavy footsteps, the wheezing of his breath as he pursued me. Elaine's voice echoed through the house, sweet and eerie, like she was rocking a child. Come back, don't run away. He reached the front door and tore it open with trembling hands. The cold night air hit my face, but before he could fully get out, he felt a hand grab my shirt collar and pull me back. He whirled around, my eyes wide as he saw the man, his wild eyes fixed on me, his hands trying to drag me back into the house. Come on, brother, he yelled, with a strange mix of anger and desperation. Elaine needs you. With one last surge of strength, he broke free, stumbled down the porch steps, and raced toward my car. My hands frantically searched for the keys as I heard the man running down the steps. Finally, he found the key, unlocked the door, and threw myself into the car. He slammed the door shut and locked it just in time before he reached it. He stopped at the edge of the porch, his silhouette dark and threatening in the faint light, his chest rising and falling heavily, his eyes fixed on me. For a moment, we faced each other, separated by the window. The air between us seemed to crackle with tension. Then, he slowly raised his hand and pointed a finger at me, his lips twisting into an ominous grin. You'll be back, he said, his voice barely audible through the closed window. You'll come back. I didn't waste a second. He started the engine, shifted into reverser, and sped down the driveway, my tires screeching on the asphalt as I drove away. He didn't look back. He couldn't. The image of Elaine and that man, of whatever they were up to, was burned deep into my brain. My heart pounded, my hands gripping the steering wheel as he raced through the empty streets. When he finally pulled into the delivery office parking lot, he felt the tension in my body ease, but the feeling of apprehension and the tingling on the back of my neck remained. He sat in my car for a while, my breathing shallow and fast, my heartbeat slowly calming down. My head desperately tried to process what had happened. How had he gotten into this situation? He had delivered to Elaine many times, but this was different. This was no longer a strange, lonely woman. This was something else darker, sicker. E pulled out my phone and called my boss, the owner of Delivering Delights. Even though it was late, the line only rang twice before a sleepy voice answered. Yeah, what is it? He was just at Elaine's, he began, my voice still trembling. There was a guy there. He tried to pull me back into the house. He barely escaped. There was a brief silence on the other end, then a heavy sigh. What do you mean, a guy? I don't know who he is, I burst out. You think you've seen him before, a homeless guy from town, but he was there, and he attacked me. He said he couldn't leave. My boss groaned in frustration. Look, man, Elaine definitely has hair issues, okay? We've had trouble with hair before, but something like this has never happened. You'll call the police and ask what they say about it. In the meantime, take the rest of the night off. We'll figure this out tomorrow. He hung up, but felt no more reassured than before. My boss's words echoed in my head, but they offered no comfort. Instead of driving straight home, I drove aimlessly through the quiet streets of our town, trying to shake off the feeling of being followed. Every time he passed a dark alley or a deserted street corner, he expected to see the man's silhouette there, watching me, waiting for me. Only after hours of aimless driving did he return home. He felt exhausted, physically and emotionally drained, but he couldn't sleep. He stayed awake, listening to every sound outside, my thoughts endlessly circling the events of the evening. The next morning, he went to my boss's office to find out more about the situation. He needed answers, some kind of closure, anything to explain the madness of the previous night. My boss was sitting at his desk, looking tired, as if he hadn't slept much either. "Did you hear from the police?" I asked, slumping into the chair across from his desk. He nodded slowly, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, they went to Elaine's last night. Turns out she's been letting this guy stay with her for a while. She met him in town and brought him home. Apparently they're involved somehow." "Involved?" I repeated, my stomach tightening. "Yeah," he said, clearly uncomfortable. "It's weird and twisted, but they're adults. The police say they can't do anything about it. Aber he didn't do anything illegal." "Nothing illegal," he repeated, my voice rising. "He attacked me. He tried to drag me back into the house." My boss leaned back, looking at me with tired eyes. "He understand it was scary, but without evidence or witnesses, it's he said," she said. "The two of them claim he never touched you." He shook my head, unable to believe it. "So, nothing happens? Nothing at all?" he sighed. "Look, he'll make sure you're never sent to Elaine again. If she places an order, someone else will go, but there's nothing more we can do." I nodded, the feeling of apprehension not subsiding. He left the office and went home, but the events of the previous night continued to gnaw at me. He couldn't get the image of Elaine and that man out of my head, the sick words they had spoken, the sinister feeling they had left behind. The following week, I quit my job. He just couldn't be driving through that town anymore, always afraid of encountering those two again. He never saw them again, and frankly, he hoped it stays that way. But sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I can still hear Elaine's sing-song voice in my head, calling to me, asking me to come back, and I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't managed to escape. There is something seductive about convenience, something that slowly wraps you up until you're caught in its net. After he moved out on my own, it became my lifestyle. Not that he was lazy, but he had a good job, a social life, everything a normal svensk something should have. But if I could avoid dealing with the outside world, I would. He paid extra for Uber rides, grocery deliveries, and food just to stay in my little bubble. He didn't see it as laziness. It was just comfort. It started small an Uber ride here, a grocery shop there, but when he realized how easy it was to avoid the mundane interactions of everyday life, I fully embraced it. No lines at the supermarket, no small talk with chatty cashiers, no small talk with people who barely knew me. Delivery services became my crutch, and soon I used them for everything. It wasn't long before Ibali left the house. At first, he told myself it was just a phase, a little secluded post-pandemic time to relax. Everyone was trying to get back to normal after COVID, right? Staying inside felt safe, and he liked safety. Soon, it wasn't just about avoiding the outside world. He simply enjoyed being alone. He kept my job, maintained friendships via text, and spent most weekends alone on the couch with my puppy, binge-watching shows. Being alone literally became my sanctuary. One weekend, he had everything perfectly planned, total isolation. He wanted to devour the latest season of my favorite Netflix show without distraction snacks, drinks, a blanket, and my puppy on my lap. It was going to be perfect. The only thing missing was a burrito from my favorite Mexican place around the corner. Nothing fancy, just a thick carne asada burrito with chips and guacamole to get me through the night. It was already 8 p.m. The sun had set, and a cozy darkness had settled over my room. The gentle glow of the TV flickered in front of me. He opened the delivery app, placed my order, and, of course, selected the contactless delivery option. It was one of those weekends. No social contact, no interruption, not even with the delivery driver. Just drop it off, take a photo, and leave. Perfect. The order was accepted quickly, and I was given an estimated delivery time of 20 minutes. He leaned back on the couch, pressed play, and occasionally glanced at my phone to track the delivery progress. 20 minutes passed, but there was no knock, no notification, nothing. He waited another 5, maybe 10 minutes. Then my phone vibrated. It was finally the delivery driver. "Hey, sorry for the delay. There was an issue at the restaurant, but don't worry, I sorted it out and I'm on my way now." Relief washed over me, although something about the situation felt strange. He wasn't sure why. He thanked him and reminded him that it was a contactless delivery. He didn't want to be disturbed, especially since he was already in my don't talk to me mode. He didn't reply. I continued watching my show, but my attention kept wandering. Time passed, and that uncomfortable feeling from before crept back up. It wasn't just the delay, it was something about his tone, or perhaps the lack of tone, no apology for being late or enjoy your food, just a Terza, I'm on my way. Then headlights pierced my living room window, jolting me out of my thoughts. He pressed mute and listened for the usual sounds, footsteps, a bag being placed down, and then retreating footsteps. But instead, he heard nothing, just silence. He stared at the door. The uncomfortable feeling in my chest grew. He should have been gone by now, but something was keeping him there. He considered peering through my window, but that felt like giving away too much of myself. Instead, he picked up my phone and opened the feed from my Ring camera. There he was, standing right outside my door. He was holding the bag, not moving, not knocking. He was just standing there. "What the hell?" he whispered to myself. He was frozen, staring straight ahead as if waiting for something. 5 minutes passed, then 10. He didn't budge an inch. My heart pounded loudly. The discomfort turned into pure fear. This wasn't normal. He hesitated before texting him. He didn't want to make contact, but he wanted him to leave, so he typed, "Hey, it's a contactless delivery. Please, just leave the food on the porch." Seconds later, I got a reply. "He need you to come out and take it. He can't leave until you do." I stared at the message, my fingers trembling. He checked the app again, making sure he had indeed selected contactless. Why was he insisting on seeing me? "Please, just leave it. It's already paid for. You don't need confirmation, I texted back. But he got no reply. He checked the Ring camera again, and this time he was looking right into it. His eyes seemed almost empty, and his face was contorted into a grotesque forced smile. Then he spoke. You should come out and take it. I just want to make sure you get it. His voice was monotone, flat, emotionless, but beneath it lurked something menacing, something sinister. Every fiber of my body screamed at me to stay inside, lock the door, and turn off the lights. He wouldn't leave. He was waiting, watching me. With trembling hands, he wrote another message. You really don't want to come out. Please, just leave the food there. This time, he didn't reply via text. Instead, he spoke directly into the camera. Come on. You see the light from your TV? It'll only take a second. What are you watching? His tone had changed. It was more casual, as if we were old friends chatting. But his words sent chills down my spine. How long had he been standing outside, looking through my window? He felt my breath catch as he backed away from the door. The air in my apartment suddenly felt heavy and suffocating. Even my puppy, stirring on the couch, sensed my tension, and then he spoke again. I had to do some things to fix your order, you know. Maybe you could at least come out and say thank you. His words hung in the air, accompanied by an unspoken threat. He swallowed hard, trying to formulate a plan. It was obvious he wouldn't leave on his own, but I didn't want to open the door. I didn't want to see him face to face, but my options were narrowing. Okay, he finally mumbled softly to myself, my hands trembling as he unlocked the door. He pulled it open a small crack, just enough to look him in the eye. He had that strange, unnatural grin, which was even more unnerving now that he saw it up close. His face was pallor, almost unhealthy, and a foul odor hit me, stale sweat, dirt, and something putrid underneath. It was overwhelming. He held the bag out to me but didn't let go. An icy wave of fear shot through me as he reached for it. It seemed like he had even tightened his grip on the bag. He think he deserve more than just a thank you, he said, his voice dripping with something slimy. He leaned closer, his eyes scrutinizing my face. Maybe you could invite me in? My pulse raced, and I forced a fake smile as he took a step back, tightening my grip on the door knob. "I can't," he stammered. "My roommate is really sick and no one is allowed inside. There wasn't a roommate, he lived alone, but he had to find a way to make him leave." His eyes wandered past me toward the faint TV light in the background. "Your roommate?" he asked, his smile replaced by a skeptical expression. "Funny. You haven't seen anyone here all night." He froze. My blood ran cold. He hadn't just been outside my door. He had been watching the house. My heart pounded, and my skin began to prickle with the realization that this monk knew more about me than he ever should have. This had to end. "I'm sorry, but I have to get back to him now," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "Please, just leave my food there." He hesitated, his eyes narrowing as if calculating his next move. And then, in a sudden moment, he shoved the door open. His hand slammed against me, pushing me back as he violently forced his way in. The stench emanating from him overwhelmed me, sewer, full, suffocating. He screamed and threw all my weight against the door with every ounce of strength he could muster. He was stronger than he expected, his dirty hands gripping the doorframe, but somehow, fueled by sheer panic, I managed to push him back, slam the door shut, and lock it. My entire body shook as I leaned against the door. For minutes, he just stood there, listening for his footsteps, which eventually retreated down the stairs. He rushed to the window and just caught sight of him walking toward his car. He glanced over his shoulder before getting in. He stayed by the door, waiting until he heard the engine start and drive away. Only then did he slide down to the floor, my body trembling, the fear slowly subsiding. My puppy, sensing my distress, licked my hand. He held him tight, trying to calm my breathing. He stayed there for an hour, motionless, staring at the door, convinced he might come back at any moment. His face, his unnatural grin, that hideous smell it, was all deeply etched into my memory. The way he had looked at me, as if assessing me, deciding what to do next. Eventually he stood up, my legs shaky. He grabbed my phone. He had to report this. With trembling fingers, he opened the delivery app and started the support chat. He described everything that had happened, from the strange massages to the attempted forced entry. The response was quick, but frustratingly vague. "We are sorry you had this experience. We will launch an investigation and take appropriate measures." That wasn't enough. He called the local police, the non-emergency number. He didn't know if they could do anything, but I had to at least file a report. The dispatcher's voice was polite, but indifferent. "We'll send someone over to take a statement," she said, but the lack of urgency in her voice made me feel even more helpless. He sat back down on the couch, staring blankly at the TV, unable to focus on anything. The burrito and chips were still on the floor near the door, untouched. The smell of the food mixed with the still present stench of the driver. He felt sick. He picked up the bag of food, carried it to the trash can, and threw it away without a second thought. My appetite was long gone. When the police officer arrived about an hour later, I told him everything. He took notes, asked a few questions, but didn't seem truly concerned. "We'll keep an eye out for him," he finally said, "but he admit without an actual crime, it's hard to take further action. Stay vigilant, lock your doors, and call us if anything happens." That was all they could do. It felt like nothing. The night was a haze of fear and sleeplessness. He left the Ring camera feed open, checking it every few minutes, expecting to see him standing outside my door again. But the porch remained empty. The street was quiet. The next morning, he woke up, if you could call it that. He must have fallen asleep at some point, but it didn't feel like real sleep. My head pounded. My nerves were frayed. He checked my phone, half expecting to see another message from him, but there was nothing. He tried to go back to my daily routine. Part of me thought the company had actually taken action. Maybe his account had been suspended, or perhaps he had realized he went too far and decided to lay low. For a few days it was quiet, but then 4 days later my phone rang. The number was unknown, but I recognized the area code. My stomach clenched, and I hesitated before answering. "Hey, it's me. It was him." I froze, the phone pressed tight against my ear. My blood ran cold. "I've been thinking about you lately," he continued, his voice terrifyingly casual, as if we were old friends catching up. "You looked like you were having a lot of fun watching that show." He watched it too. "Pretty good, who?" My breath hitched. How did he know that? Was he watching me again? My hands trembled, and my voice was barely a whisper. What do you want?" A pause followed, then that oily, self-satisfied tone returned to his voice. "He just thought we could hang out, you know? Maybe chill a bit. We seem to like the same shows. Looks like we could get along great." He couldn't speak. The sheer horror of the last few days had completely paralyzed me. To him, this all seemed normal, almost friendly. It was as if he didn't see this as stalking or a threat, but just a perfectly normal conversation. "He've been thinking about the other night," he continued. "I think we got off on the wrong foot. Maybe he was a bit too forward, but he was just doing my job, you know. Delivering food is hard out there. People don't appreciate it enough. I felt sick. Bile rose in my throat. He wanted to hang up, but he was frozen. My hand couldn't move. So what do you say? He pressed on. We could meet up, maybe grab some food. You like burritos, right? That was the breaking point. He hung up, my whole body shaking, and the phone fell onto the couch. Panic flooded me like a wave, overriding all rational thought. With yacky movements, he grabbed the phone and immediately called the police. My voice was trembling as I recounted the situation. The police took the report, but their answer was the same. We'll investigate. If you feel unsafe, we can issue a temporary protective order until we've contacted him. But they hadn't even found him yet. He hung up, feeling completely helpless. He couldn't just wait until he decided what to do next and possibly show up again. For the next few days, he was constantly on edge again. He avoided the outside world even more than before, only leaving the house when absolutely necessary. He stopped ordering food, didn't open the door, and barricaded myself in my apartment. Every sound made me yump. Every movement outside brought back the fear. The police contacted me once, but it was clear they weren't making much progress. And then, one evening, it happened again. He came home from work, tired and stressed, and there it was on my porch, wrapped in a brown paper bag with my name on it. The same order as before: carne asada burrito, chips, guacamole. He hadn't ordered it. He stared at the bag as fear built up inside me, like acid gnawing at my chest. This wasn't a delivery. This was a message. Heck knew where I lived, knew my routine, and was reminding me that he could come back any time. This time, he didn't touch the bag. He didn't even go near it. Instead, I double-locked the door, grabbed my phone, and immediately called the police. My hands were trembling as I recounted the nephew incident. This time, they finally seemed to take it seriously. They sent someone over to take an official statement and finally issued a protective order. But that didn't make me feel any safer. How could a piece of paper protect me from this man? In the days that followed, he at least stopped coming by in person at least. I didn't see him. But now and then, he'd receive a message from an unknown number or an email from a new account, always asking if he enjoyed the show or suggesting we should meet up. Every time, he reported it to the authorities, but there was little they could do. He had to give him credit. He was smart. He always stayed just outside the police's reach. But eventually, the messages stopped. Weeks went by without any word from him, and slowly I started to relax. Maybe he had moved on. Maybe he had found someone else to harass. Whatever the reason, he was just glad he was gone, but the terror he left behind didn't fade easily. Even months later, he found myself looking over my shoulder when he came home. He checked the cameras and triple-locked my doors before going to bed. The fear that he might come back remained deeply rooted in me. It was an experience that shaped me. I've been more cautious since then, more distrustful of strangers, and less inclined to prioritize a convenience over my safety. Convenience can be seductive, but sometimes it comes at a price. He've been delivering pizzas for almost 2 years, not exactly what he envisioned when he moved to this sleepy little town, but it pays the bills. He originally just looked for something to tide me over until he could find a marketing job. But the more I did it, the more I realized he kind of liked the freedom that comes with this job, at least at first. But if there's one thing I've learned in all these shifts, it's that being a woman in this line of work is a constant game of cat and mouse. Everyone becomes a potential threat the moment they see me standing at their door. What for a man is just a delivery becomes something entirely different for me, 52 and barely 100 pounds, standing there clutching a pizza box almost like a shield. The regulars are pretty harmless, mostly families with kids, elderly couples, or office workers burning the midnight oil. But then there are the others, the ones who wait for that knock, the ones who open the door a little too eagerly, whose eyes linger a little too long, the ones who ask my name even though it's clearly on the receipt, the ones who lean in a little too close when handing over the cash. He tried to keep my distance, always making sure I stand just far enough back so there's a little space between us when the door opens. He learned these tricks quickly, but despite all the unpleasant encounters, he've managed to keep everything professional, so far no near misses, no moments where my goot screamed at me to run. Until a few days ago. It was a Friday afternoon, just after lunch, the kind of shift where you lull yourself into a false sense of security. The sun is shining, the roads are clear, and you start to forget how quickly everything can change. He was on my way to pick up an order when he noticed a truck behind me, a big, lifted Chevy with one of those steel bumpers that looks like it's designed to mow things down. A truck that screams, "You don't care who else is on the road. Guys like me survive here." A Confederate flag proudly fluttered on the back, and when I saw it, my stomach immediately clenched. At first, I thought they were just impatient, like most guys who drive trucks like that, tailgating, eager to pass. But then the engine roared, and the front of the truck closed in, almost kissing the bumper of my little Toyota. The sun reflected off the windshield, but he could still make out the shadowy figures of two people behind the glass, leaning forward as if bracing themselves for something. He tried to stay calm, lightly taking my foot off the gas, hoping they would just pass me. But they didn't. Instead, they swerved out, passed me on the narrow 2-lane road, and then cut sharply in front of me, forcing me onto the shoulder. Gravel sprayed from beneath my tires as he tried to regain control. They honked loudly and long, and he could see one of them leaning out the window, laughing as they sped down the road. He sat there for a moment, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My phone buzzed in the cup holder, probably just the app notifying me of a new order, but he didn't move. He stared at the disappearing taillights, feeling adrenaline surge through my body like electricity. He hadn't really had time to get their license plate, and even if I had, what would I have done with it? Call the police and say I was run off the road? He doubted they would care. So he did the only thing he really could do. He shook it off, took a deep breath, and drove on. Besides, what were the chances I would ever see those two guys again? 2 days later, he got an order that changed everything. It was late afternoon, just as the sun began to dip below the trees. The address was on the outskirts of town, a place he had never been before, which wasn't exactly rare, but it just felt off. Maybe it was because the customer had placed the order by phone instead of using the app. We hardly ever got phone orders anymore. Everyone used the app because it was so convenient. But here he was, driving down a road he'd only heard rumors about, heading to a customer he really didn't want to meet. The driveway itself was long, winding through dense clusters of trees and narrow, gravel path that led deep into the woods. As soon as he turned onto the path, he felt my stomach clench with anxiety. The trees were thick, and their shadows swallowed the last of the daylight, plunging everything into an oppressive gloom. My car's headlights barely cut through the darkness, and I had to drive at a near crawl to avoid hitting a pothole. And then he saw it, parked right in front of me at the edge of the driveway, that truck. My heart immediately sank. There was no doubt it was the same big Chevy with the Confederate flag hanging from the back. It stood there as if it had been waiting for me, the same truck that had run me off the road 2 days earlier. He stopped my car, my pulse hammering in my ears. He could feel the oppressive weight of the forest and the situation pressing in on me from all sides. The air was heavy, too still. For a brief moment, he thought about backing up, turning around, and just disappearing. But then he glanced at the pizza boxes on the seat next to me. Oh, but what was he supposed to do? Just abandon the order? No, he couldn't afford to lose the tip, especially after Zook's bad week. Still, he didn't want them to see my car, so I parked it behind a clump of bushes where my vehicle wouldn't be visible if they came down the driveway. He pulled out my phone and checked the signal, at least it wasn't completely gone. He scrolled to my boss's number, my thumb hovering over the call button, just in case. He grabbed the pizzas, locked the car, and began walking down the gravel path toward the house. It wasn't far, maybe 100 yards, but every step felt heavy, as if he were walking into a trap I couldn't yet see. Everything around me felt overly intense. The air smelled damp, like wet leaves and rotting wood. The silence was so dense he could hear my own breathing, which echoed almost too loudly in my ears. When the house became visible through the trees, it was old, dilapidated shack that looked like it had been patched together over the years without any regard for appearance. The porch sagged in the middle, the windows were covered in grime, making it nearly impossible to see inside. There was a gate separating the house from the rest of the property. As he approached, he noticed a figure sitting on the porch, rocking back and forth in an old wooden chair. He was just staring at me. My breath hitched as the man stood up and slowly waved me forward. He recognized him immediately. He was one of the guys from the truck who had run me off the road. He was wearing the same dirty baseball cap, his shirt stained and stretched tight over his massive body. "Hey, so you're the pizza girl," he called out, his voice echoing across the yard. He nodded, my throat too tight to say anything. My hands were gripping the pizza boxes so tightly I thought they might be crushed. He grinned, showing his yellowed teeth. "Didn't think we'd see you again so soon." My stomach turned. The man stepped off the porch and began walking around the side of the house until he was out of sight. He hesitated for a moment, standing by the gate, unsure what to do next. But then another man appeared from behind the house, taller and thinner, with the same greasy look. He waved, just like the first guy. "Sorry about the other day," he called out as he walked toward the gate. "We didn't mean to scare you. We were just having a little fun, you know." But he felt really bad about it. "You really do." He came closer, just close enough for me to see the glint in his eyes. He wasn't really apologizing. He was playing with me. "You've got a fat tip for you," he said, pulling a wad of bills from his pocket. "Come on in. We'll make it up to you." He hesitated, glancing back at my car, hidden behind the trees. My phone was still in my pocket. He could call my boss and tell him what was going on, but would anyone even get out here in time? The man beckoned me forward, the cash still in his hand. "Come on, we don't bite unless you want us to," he laughed, a deep, ugly sound that sent a shiver down my spine. Against my better judgment, he stepped through the gate, my eyes fixed on him the whole time. He felt the weight of the pizza boxes in my hands, but it wasn't the burden of the boxes that weighed heavily. It was the feeling that I had crossed a line, one he wasn't sure he could ever go back from. Slowly and cautiously, he walked toward the house, my steps deliberate. The man with the money kept grinning, beckoning me closer. The other one reappeared from behind the house, this time with something in his hands. He squinted to see what it was. The fading light made it difficult. And then he saw it. Leashes, thick, heavy dog leashes. At the end of the leashes were two snarling Rottweilers, the dogs straining against their collars, eyes fixed on me, teeth bared, a deep, menacing growl vibrating in my gout. The man holding the leashes grinned even weirder, and without a word, he let them go. He didn't have time to think. He did the only thing I could. He ran. The dogs were immediately after me, their snarls turning into furious barking as they chased across the yard. Behind me, he heard the men laughing, their voices shouting encouragement, clapping their hands as if this were a macabre game for them. My legs burned as he sprinted toward the gate. The sound of paws pounding on the ground was far too close, far too fast. In a moment of pure panic, he did the only thing that came to mind. He threw the pizza boxes over my shoulder. The dogs lunged at the boxes, tearing them open, snarling and snapping at the pizzas. The brief moment of distraction was all he needed to reach the gate. He shoved it open, slipped through, and ran toward my car. My hands were shaking so violently I almost dropped the keys, but somehow I managed to unlock the door and throw myself inside. The tires spun as he floored the gas, the truck and the house disappearing in my rearview mirror. He didn't stop driving until he was back at the pizza place. My hands were still shaking as I told my manager what had happened. At first, he didn't believe me. Who would? But when he showed him the video I had secretly recorded on my phone, where one of the men was laughing as the dogs chased me, his face went pale. We reported the incident to the police. Of course, they didn't do much, just gave the man a fine and a few warnings. But it turned out his name was Randall, and he had a long history in town, a notorious troublemaker who was constantly in and out of Yale. But after this incident, people had finally had enough of him. For the first time, the town started seriously avoiding him and calling the police whenever he messed up again. As for me, he still deliver pizzas, but every time he stop in front of a house, he makes sure to park so he can drive away quickly, just in case he ever encounter someone like Randall again. The pandemic forced many people to seek new employment and opportunities, especially during the initial economic crisis. Uber Eats, DoorDash, Amazon, all these companies saw a massive surge in traffic as cities mandated people to stay home. Many places declared these drivers essential workers, which kept me busy during the unstable months of the pandemic. He became a delivery driver out of necessity back then, but even today, I still work occasionally on weekends. My story, however, takes place in 2020, when no one really knew what the future held. He worked for a major delivery company in one of the largest cities in the US. At that time, he was constantly at least a day behind on deliveries, if not more. There were strikes, people were ordering more than ever, and all of this led to an extremely stressful work environment. One day, he saw a meme joking that all we drivers did was pee in water bottles and lose packages. Honestly, that was the golden age for delivery driver memes. Because of my backlog, he started working overtime almost every day. Instead of working from 9 to 5, he started at 8 am and didn't stop until he was completely exhausted, usually around 7 p.m., sometimes later if he had a Red Bull that day. One evening, it was one of my last packages, and I remember thinking I could just leave it until the next morning to deliver first. He was really hungry and just wanted to put my feet up, but the destination address was nearby, so I thought, go on, just do it. The package was no bigger than my fist, so it wouldn't stay in my truck overnight. I wish he hadn't been so stubborn. Why didn't I just go home like I wanted to? He drove to a housing complex, and I felt uneasy even before arriving. It looked like you could expect chalk lines on the sidewalk and fluttering police tape in the windnot, literally, but you know what I mean. Groups of men patrolled the parking lot, stood in dark corners, large dogs barked behind small fences, and some cars had bullet holes. He was in a big city, and some parts were seedy and rough. He scanned the package, left the truck, and looked up the address. It seemed to be a ground floor apartment, and thank God he wouldn't have to walk up 10 flights of stairs. He locked the truck behind me, just to be safe. There was nothing valuable inside, but this area was no place for risks. After some searching, he finally found the building and the apartment. It was a rundown corner unit, its windows covered with all sorts of things: aluminum foil, movie posters, empty food boxes. Everything seemed designed to block out the light. Just looking at it gave me a bad feeling, but I thought, almost done. He walked around the building and found a man leaning against a tree, smoking a cigarette. He politely nodded at him, and he returned the nod with a casual 2-finger salute, the typical greeting among men in my city. He turned and walked toward the front door. He just wanted to leave, so he rang the doorbell, put the package on the ground, and was just about to straighten up when the door flew open with aggressive energy. It was every driver's nightmare: an angry recipient treating you like a cop trying to interrogate them. But when he saw the man, he knew this was different. He was extremely thin, half-dressed, and covered in what he could only identify as injection sites. He was dirty, unwashed, and the living space behind him was an absolute mess. We made brief eye contact, and I politely said hello, then turned to leave, but he called out after me, "What the hell, man? I've been waiting all day for you." I turned back to him, shrugged, and apologized with the standard line, "We're understaffed, man. What can I say?" "I think he saw you drop my package," he said loudly. He stopped, having no idea what he was talking about. He pointed to the package at his feet and asked if he meant that. "Yeah, man. He saw you throw it against the door." "It's probably broken." He started to contradict him, but the situation escalated. The man behind me, smoking the cigarette, was apparently a friend of the man in the apartment. The guy in the apartment asked him, "Did you see him throw it, man?" And of course the other guy nodded and said, "Yeah, I saw it." Now it was serious, not just because they wanted to report me, but because I was surrounded by potentially dangerous criminals. They tried to push me into the apartment to settle the matter, but I had my own protocols, and at the top of the list was never go anywhere you're forced to go, especially not while on shift. The man in the apartment suddenly pulled a gun from his waistband and pointed it directly at my face. The conversation went silent, and we all stared at the trigger. He told me to reconsider, saying the whole thing was just a big misunderstanding. The smoker extinguished his cigarette, grabbed my elbow, and laid me into the apartment. My heart pounded in my chest, and I knew anything could happen now. Once we were in the living room and they locked the door behind me, all my suspicions were confirmed. It was a crack house, and these 2 guys were undoubtedly dealers exactly where I didn't want to be. The man almost immediately put the gun away after the door was locked, which relieved me a little. Nevertheless, the situation was far from safe. The most sinister detail was the door. It was so securely deadbolted that he knew wouldn't get out easily. From the moment the door closed, the entire situation turned into an episode of the Three Stooges. The 2 of them were so high, they barely knew what they were doing. They tried to call my office for 15 minutes, but couldn't focus on their phones long enough to dial the number and actually call. It was a total mess. From what he could gather, the 2 seemed to have run out of their supply of what they were really addicted to. They seemed to be consuming anything they could now, just to dampen their withdrawal symptoms. To say they were high would be an understatement. It was obvious they hadn't slept in days and were running on fumes of whatever they could find. That was the moment I realized what they were up to. It was a botched scam attempt. Like many others, they had apparently seen videos of delivery drivers carelessly tossing packages over fences or similar things, so they ordered something cheap on Amazon, waited for it to be delivered, and were now trying to stage a fake incident. He wondered how long the guy had been leaning against that tree outside, waiting for me. They were completely crazy, but he had to admit it was somehow odd how they thought they would get compensation in the middle of the night. Why did they think we delivery drivers had cash on us to pay for damages? The logic behind it was incomprehensible to me, but he could see the desperation. He tried to encourage them a little further, just to see how far they would go with this absurd plan. But I had to be careful. After all, they had forced me in here with a gun, so this wasn't purely fun for me. While they were distracting each other and looking toward the back of the apartment, he became more cautious. Then they suddenly heard something in the back of the apartment. Both turned their heads, reacting to something I couldn't see or hear. He assumed it was just hallucinations caused by sleep deprivation and drugs, but both firmly believed someone had broken into their bedroom. One of them began rummaging through the kitchen drawers, apparently looking for a flashlight. The other yelled something and kept an eye on the dark hallway. They didn't find a flashlight, but both were holding cell phones, so we told them their phones had a flashlight function. That completely freaked them out. They frantically turned on the flashlights and told me to guard the front door while they went to the back to look for the supposed intruder. He nodded like an old comrade in arms, pretending to have their back. As they disappeared down the hall, he slowly moved back toward the door. He carefully slid the deadbolt back and opened the door as quietly as possible. The last thing I saw were the beams of the cell phone flashlights dancing over the shabby walls and the uncertain silhouettes of the two moving from room to room with a pistol pure chaos. He was out of the apartment, but by no means safe. He still had to get back to my truck, parked in that sketchy complex, and somehow find my way out of that slum and back into the city. It was much later than he had thought, and all he wanted was to go home. He quickened my pace without running, so as not to draw too much attention to myself. Everything went smoothly until I reached the parking lot, and then I heard something behind me. To this day, I don't know exactly what it was, but it sounded like someone was running toward me. He spun around abruptly, but no one was there. In that moment, I thought he had imagined it, but as he turned back toward the parking lot, it happened. He turned at just the right angle to walk directly into the diagonally bent antenna of one of the cars in front of me. It was bent at the base and stuck out horizontally from the car instead of vertically, and that antenna was perfectly at my eye level. The tip of the antenna pierced right under my eyelid and burrowed back behind my eye. He had harpooned myself in the face while sprinting away from that nightmare. In a panic, he jumped back to get the thing out of my eye, but the movement only made everything worse. The antenna had a small ball at the end, which was now pressing between my eye and the socket. The metal must have penetrated at least an inch or two deep before he retreated backward, and everything slid out the way it had gone in. The pain was unimaginable. Blood started pouring from my eye. He was only a few feet from my truck, but he couldn't see the keyhole to open the door. He stumbled to the back of the truck and held my eye with both hands, praying it wouldn't fall out. After a few minutes, my vision cleared a little, but the pain was still explosive. Finally, he managed to get back into the truck and drove slowly home. Since we weren't required to bring the trucks back if we were behind schedule, I would simply take over a new, fully loaded truck the next morning. Fortunately, my eye didn't fall out, but the injury required several rather involved doctor visits that stretched over 18 months. Sometimes, you wonder if those crackheads are still sitting in their apartment looking for a phantom intruder. They probably don't even remember holding me hostage.